just recently. We'll do a really quick start from the beginning. We are a nation of shopkeepers, not a nation of distribution centres. There's a huge amount of pain that's been going on in the world of retail, and we can see it played out in our newspapers every single week. But of course, a lot of that is of the sector's own making. There are some very big brands which for a very long time did not change their formulas. They rested on their laurels and they stood firm to the things that they'd kept doing for many, many years. Now, whilst that was amusing, actually, the messages were very, very sharply in contrast to what consumers wanted. Change that was going to actually propel this generational, sectoral, structural, seismic change which we now see taking place within the whole retail industry. More often than not, these were companies which had become institutionalized, stuck to an old formula and doing things in ways that more often than not suited the staff rather than the customer. You know, we often said that the customer is always right, but more often than not, that was used as a way to almost poke fun and almost say, yeah, we're not listening, we're not interested, we're not too bothered, and we'll carry on doing what we've done before. Now, of course, many of those big firms that were, in a sense, part of that older generation have already fallen by the wayside, and we see some of the biggest still around actually teetering. Debenhams' announcement back in January of nearly 6% lost sales over the Christmas period is serious and dramatic. Marks & Spencer's pledge to close 100 stores by 2022 is something that business would not previously have considered. So we should all be very aware of the rate, the scale and the pace of change that's affecting the industry. And I think any of us who are involved in the industry have an opportunity to do something about that. Now, we can see very clearly what's been driving this in getting all the headlines in most recent times, this new digital world. Now, I don't necessarily blame the internet 100% for what's going on, and I certainly don't think that Amazon is the villain of the pack. What Amazon have done is actually just been very quick to respond to changing tastes. They've provided greater levels of convenience, amazing levels of choice, and offered price visibility and price difference, which actually others have found uncomfortable. But actually, one person's opportunity also gives the same, throws the same gauntlet down to everyone else. What can we do in response? But of course, the thing that's hard to respond with against the internet, and certainly if you're running a high street business, whether that's a big chain or a small independent boutique, is the fact that the internet is always open. Online, mobile, increasingly virtual reality stores, and all offering click and collect. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen the amusing videos which have been surfacing from Milton Keynes about Amazon's trial with the robots, which are now doing deliveries. It was fun to see how they were struggling in the snow yesterday, so it's not a fully good news story there. But what we can see is that the internet is always open. And the internet has taken a vast cost out of the front end in terms of people and resources, and actually transferred those costs into technological solutions. But of course, some of those brands which have pioneered the way with the internet are also, looking back at more conventional retail channels. So, these channel switches, as we see, people like Misguided, people like Bowden, who was originally a mail order business, are increasingly looking to the high street, and have been doing so, as a way to extend their appeal and reach new customers. But here too, it's not all good news. We saw just before Christmas that ASOS issued one of its few but very alarming profit warnings. Misguided store here on the left-hand side, which was in Westfield, Stratford in London, the big retail mall that was open for the Olympics, was open to huge fanfare 3 years ago. Only this week has the brand decided to close that store. And paradoxically, in the same week that it's opened its first international store in Dubai, even more paradoxically, when you think that Dubai in the Middle East is a market where e-commerce is actually in its infancy and represents a tiny, tiny proportion of sales. So, I'm not sure that we can actually draw any big conclusions from the fact that we can say that, e-commerce is the thing that's killed the high street, because there's lots and lots of contributing factors. Business rates, staff costs, workplace pensions, blah, blah, blah. But it's all come together as a perfect storm. But it's without question that we can see that one of the big things that has really sucked the life out of the high street in the last 10 years is this switch and this essentially change of balance from physical investment and real cash investment in actual retail stores into the investment in tech. And increasingly that we can see that tech in all of its forms is becoming increasingly granularized. So before we were happy to accept a simple website, a website that did X, Y, and Z and perhaps leave a package at our door in 3 or 4 days' time. Now we're seeing tech really, really, really getting under the skin, influencing every level of our preference, every understanding of our everyday lives, and really trying to penetrate every decision that we make. And of course, tech is massively funded by huge Silicon Valley industries, huge companies that aren't necessarily, big fans of retail, but what they are big fans of is selling their technologies. So I think that what we've seen in the last 10 years is the big companies themselves certainly have rushed to adopt an online and e-commerce strategy. They have starved investment out of their stores. A few staff less here, a few less projects here, delaying some transformations or refurbishments. And actually, over time, it's all started to add up. And interestingly, in the circles that I mix with other kind of business leaders, other conference events, we're talking to those kind of thought leaders and shapers within the industry, there is a growing voice and a growing recognition that retail has had imbalanced investment. And the huge costs and sums of servicing e-commerce are also now demonstrating the less aspects of profitability. When we're starting to incur returns rates of about 30%, and of those returns at 30%, 10% actually cannot be put back into the supply chain. It is actually going to waste. That's the big cost to business. So, e-commerce is good, but not necessarily the only answer. And I think really what all retailers have got to do is to look to whatever they feel that they can do best and get on with the job and do it as well as possible. And for us as a company, what this really means, and a lot of the work that we're doing, and certainly have been doing with brands over the last 25 years that we've been around, is really always getting people to focus on the simple things that can make a difference. Forget the fancy, forget the highfalutin, forget the big, expensive flagship projects. Other people can do those. Our work with retailers is on simple, pragmatic, easy to do, and stuff that when you do it well and do it regularly makes a commercial difference. And of course, our background to all of this is what we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes. So, we're going to have a look at how do you maximise your street view? What are some of the fundamentals of retail presentation? Why do store standards matter so much, and how are they intrinsically linked with delivery of great service? And of course, when you do all of those things well, how you add value to the customer's daily shop, and how do you build that loyalty by repeating and refining and getting better at those things day in, day out. Now, we've used for the last 25 years this simple adage as a business, and it's called thinking like a customer. Now, it's easy to say, but it's actually quite difficult to achieve in reality, because it really means changing perspectives. Unlike the team from Are You Being Served, who were, pretty much stood on their side of the counter and delivering what they thought was best for the customer, thinking like a customer means literally swapping sides and standing on the other side of the counter and changing your point of view. It means being proactive, it remains to be solutions focused, and really doing things in very practical, simple ways that the customer will find the sweet spot with. Now look, as a company, we probably take 5,000 plus images of store windows each year, and this is a couple which we weeded out from the archive. Now, I'm saying that these are probably some of the worst windows that I've seen. Now, hopefully you will all agree, and hopefully there's nobody sitting here that is responsible. Now, we haven't called them out to make anybody feel bad. I've called them out for one particular reason. When you think how much time consumers now spend looking at a piece of glass that's usually in front of them, can be small, can be big. Mobile and home pages are what matters. It's your way into the brand. But that's no different to a shop window. It's another piece of glass. And in this too, the retailer has the opportunity to reveal their proposition. What do we stand for? What's our brand? What do we stock? What's our price proposition? How much do we care? How do we create solutions for you as a shopper and give you things that you want to buy? Now, clearly looking at these two examples, I think it's fair to say that the windows have not been the prime concern or prime consideration for these businesses. And really I'm calling it out not to lecture, but to actually raise awareness and to raise a new renewed consciousness around the importance of shop windows on the street. Whether it's simply that's passing cars or passing foot traffic, you have that opportunity to stop people in their tracks. And whilst you only may get only a few seconds of their time, it's a few seconds of their time that could introduce footfall into the store. So, like with all of the things we're going to talk about here in terms of these practical quick fixes, I would urge you all to go back to your business and say, what do our windows say? Are they good, bad, indifferent? What could we do practically to make them better? Now, in the same way that we take, lots of bad pictures of stores, we also take plenty of good ones too. And this is one which I just called out here. And again, it could be one of any sector, be it from food to grocery to homewares to gift. It makes no difference to us because the answer is always the same. You need a strong theme. You need a compelling message. Do simple things well. Clean and tidy. If prices are important, put them there and make them loud. But more importantly, have a message and give the customer something which is actually relevant and on trend. Now, talking of trends, that's what this show is all about. What's new, what's great, what's different, what's interesting. But of course, don't hide those at the back of the store. If you're a brand that is all about seasonal newness, bring it to the front and make it the hero of the store. It doesn't really matter whether it's on a table, whether it's on a fixture, whatever equipment you use. The key thing is bring together a compelling story. Call it out, make it evident, bring it front and center stage to the consumer. Remember, that new stock is what you just spent your money on. It's what you need to turn fastest, because when the money has turned and the money is in the bank, it releases more money for you to come back and buy new stock. Windows and store presentation are the engine of the business, the things which will actually get the consumer's interest and their attention. Now, there's plenty of examples where store presentation goes wrong, and it doesn't matter whether you have too much inventory, which is actually badly organized, badly segmented, illogically placed, or whether your problem is one of replenishment. What you have to do is get on top of the stock on a daily basis, and that's where walking the floor is really practical and really useful. By doing those regular floor walks and reviews, you can actually think like a customer and ask the questions. Try for yourself, is every size that you're wanting out on display, or is it in the stockroom? It's incredible how many sales are lost in clothing simply by not replenishing on a daily basis and assuming that what's on display is in stock for the consumer. Just because you see a full size ratio on a table, don't make the assumption that everything is there. I've visited a whole bunch of stores in America recently, simply as part of one of our client projects to actually do a physical stock check for them. And actually the photographs showed huge, deep piles of product. And when you went into it, typically there was either one or two sizes of the full range which were available. Having 8 of the same size can only ultimately serve one customer of that size. The stockroom that's got everything else, that's where they're never going to visit. So it's really important to think about these in very, very practical, everyday ways. And there are certain things that, you just, wouldn't take it for granted. Ralph Lauren at Bicester, and this isn't their Bicester store, but one of their international stores, actually have more staff in overnight to do recovery and replenishment ready for the following day's trade than they do during the day. Because in the day, they actually focus their teams where people need most help, on the fitting rooms and on the cash desk, because that's all about processing the sale quickly. Overnight, it's all about getting ready and resetting for the following day. And in very much the same way that Primark used that same business model for the way that they would trade their own spaces. But of course, great product presentation is all about clarity. Clear product statements, make it easy to buy, and call out the ranges that you've got with great simplicity. Whether you're selling, pesto or Panama huts, again, the rules are the same. Clear segmentation, making sure all of the options are easily available, avoiding duplicated choice, and making sure that there are no gaps in the ranges. If you sell a range of sauce mixes, make sure that the top 5 that people use are in your assortment. Making it easy to buy is one of the fundamentals where people get it wrong, because they overcomplicate. By introducing more complexity as necessary, all they do is slow the consumer down. Think simplicity, think like a customer, and ask yourself those practical questions. Is it there? Is it available? Do I understand it? Is there something that works with it? If I buy those two things together, do they make sense? If any of those answers are wrong, you have an opportunity to do something about it. Now, of course, making it easy to buy and having great impact and street factor is really where it starts. But of course, where consumers also make their big decisions about brands is in their overall perceptions that are formed. And this is where a relentless pursuit on source standards really matters. And I think it's incredibly important that people recognise that the shop floor is not your working area. You know, how many times do deliveries arrive that don't get processed? How many deliveries are processed on the floor? How many cash debts get cluttered up by, incompatible work streams happening together, trying to serve people whilst at the same time processing parcels, whilst at the same time booking in stock? Now, it's sometimes difficult to do all of those things in the same space, especially when you're on limited staff resources. But the key thing to remember is, as a customer, what would that mean to you? How would those standards of either poor service or health and safety issues, or even just a slippage in your mind around, wow, gosh, this is so awful, why would you want to shop there? Now, I can't tell you how many cafes and coffee shops that I visit on an annual basis, but what I can tell you is the amount of effort that's spent on dressing the counter is in no way repeated on the amount of times that the bathrooms are serviced. And I judge a place where I'll go and buy a coffee and a cake based on how clean the toilets are, not the other way around. And that's where thinking like a customer really hits home, because it's about the perceptions that are formed and how those perceptions then go on to influence whether a person decides to buy. High standards don't have to be difficult. Sometimes it's just about putting a stake in the ground and actually saying, what do we care about and what do we believe in? This is Thomas Pink. You may know it in a more traditional form. This is their new store concept, and this is one from New York. Just brought it back a couple of weeks ago. But what it demonstrates is that actually, whether you're high price or low price, those simple things around high standards really do make a difference. They have the chance to elevate every proposition and make it feel like it's worth more. Clear merchandising statements, easy to shop statements, products that look as if they've been cared for. And of course, the more expensive the items that you sell, the more you have to think about those things. Because if you think like a customer and ask, would I buy it? Actually, if it doesn't look worth the money, or if it doesn't look like it's been cared for, why would you? Now, we talk about service in visual thinking a lot with the brands that we work with, and we're trying to really always hammer home the simple messages that make a difference. More often than not, we use case studies from other brands that help people to realize that actually, going back to the basics and doing the simple things well, we should never overlook. Now, this may not be a brand that you're familiar with, but it's an American fast food restaurant. And actually, it's one of the American fast food brands which is least recognized internationally. It's not McDonald's, it's not KFC, it's not any of those big names. This is Chick-fil-A. But you know what? Consistently and with consumers, whenever they are polled, Chick-fil-A comes out #1 ranking in terms of courtesy. Please, thank you, and have a good day might seem repetitive, but actually they make a real difference to consumers. How many times did you recently go into a shop where you had two people perhaps behind the till, more interested in talking to each other, talking about a task, doing something else? You either didn't get acknowledgement, eye contact, a please, a thank you. Your stuff was just rammed into a bag and you were sent on your way. Wow, it happens a lot when you stop and think about it. Now, Chick-fil-A recognise that this is a key driver. And in a world of lots of choice, and trust me, they are up against some very, very big competitors, often with much fancier menus, fancier environments, and certainly bigger marketing budgets. Where they can compete, and where they compete really hard, is on service and that connection with the customer. So that they actually say, you know what, no matter what you think about overall about us as a brand, my relationship and my engagement with you one-to-one personally here today will be noted, and it will have been a positive experience that you've taken out of that. And all I would ask you to do is go back and think about that when you're with your own customers and with your teams. And when you're busy and overstretched and you've got more than one thing to do, remember it's the person at the desk who is offering to spend their money with you, and it's your opportunity to make that transaction count and for that customer to come back based on the response you gave them. There are all kinds of big trends and big ideas that the big corporate retailers are doing. And if anybody goes to New York in the next 6 months, please try and visit this new Nike store. It's called the Nike House of Innovation. It's on Fifth Avenue. It's opposite the Saks store. And it's really a game changer. What makes it a game changer is the fact that Nike actually get all of the things I'm talking about. They get store presentation, they get street presence. Wow, I mean, look, they changed all of the glazing on this particular building they've occupied to look like a pair of Air Max trainers. It's absolutely remarkable, trust me. But in store, they recognize that whilst people might love the Nike brand, not everybody wants to be seen wearing exactly the same Nike product. So personalization is a massive part of their offer. And here you can personalize up to 6,000 t-shirts. You can create any kind of training shoe that you want, and into all of its fashion and apparel ranges, you can have those personalized as well. There is a huge investment here for the consumer in terms of giving them a customized product, which is a brand they love, but is unique to them. Now, for you as independent businesses, or even for smaller retail chains, some of those aspects of personalization are just impossible even to dream of, because they're expensive, they're too difficult to implement, and they can cause other kinds of problems. But there are areas potentially where you could really personalize and go out of your way to do something more and give added value to the customer. Alterations, sizing, repairs, finding stock for people, joining collectives like the Atelier network, for example. Giving people more back in terms of provenance, understanding where the ranges come from, sharing details of the makers and places. And ultimately, looking creatively how you too can offer delivery services, either individually or working together within your high street, so that you can actually have a service which is collectively pooled. More too often than not, big corporate companies are inflexible and they lack agility. But this is something that the independent sector can really, really do and make its own. Here you're not bound by the same corporate rules, and therefore you can think like customers much more easily. You have the opportunity here to really stand on the opposite side of the desk and think, what can we do to make a difference? Those nonsense, rules, all the things that get in the way are things that sometimes give customers the greatest frustrations. I remember myself recently being in a store where they'd actually got a discontinued product which actually had to be disassembled from part of the store. I offered to buy it, I offered to come back, I offered to wait, but actually the process was going to be so cumbersome that I actually lost the will to live and said, do you know what, I like it, but there are alternatives out there which are much, much easier to get. Now, in that instance, this corporate brand, corporate chain, and otherwise quite a good business, lost about 120 quid's worth of sale from us, and we just went elsewhere. Now, I'm not terribly bothered about the sale that we lost, because it's actually given me the opportunity to talk about it in probably about another 30 business groups where I've now met over the last year. But the point is that it was rules that got in the way, things that could have been easily and quickly changed that would have made a difference to us as a customer, and ultimately would have put some money in the bank. And this is where independence, and I don't know if you're aware of this particular brand, but the store is called Pud. It was set up by Frances Bishop, who was one of the Apprentice finalists a couple of years back. And she's introduced a different kind of children's business. It's a children's business that is selling off-price stock, about 70 to 80% less, out of season, old brands. But where she has really differentiated her business is on customer service and literally finding ways to go out of their way to do things differently on behalf of the customer. No rules, unbridled, working with the customer to deliver this as flexibly as possible, either to work within their budget, within their area, within the kinds of products they're looking to buy. And it's demonstrated very quickly how a business can grow by not necessarily doing the same things as everyone else. The final part is really this moment, this clear moment at the till that operates. It's that point of added value to the customer. Look, we're living in times now where there's increasing pressure on waste. There's all kinds of moves on bag reduction and removal of plastic and blah, blah, blah. I get all of that. But fundamentally, even if the customer doesn't take a bag, you as a retailer have an opportunity to make them feel good about the purchase. Fold it, care for it, treat it with respect, process the sale without a pen in your hand, which might end up going on the products themselves. Thinking like a customer is your most important arsenal you can take away from this session. Because when you get on the other side of the desk and see what they see, then it can really make the difference. Now, this is a flagship store from Banana Republic in Manhattan. I took it last week before. It's a flagship store, one of the most busy, high-profile, important locations in New York. The store has been open about 3 years at huge cost. And that is the main cash and wrap area. Wow. What does that say to the customer? No help, no room, no space, no organisation, no control. Our priorities are clearly elsewhere with the amount of tech and parcels and e-commerce returns on there. Wow. Now, this is a company that's also reporting major problems and major store closures. And in fact, as part of the Gap Group, it's on a retreat from American malls and high streets. Now, the message that we have as a company to them is to remind them of the simple things that work. As a customer, how would you shop there? How would you feel good about anything you wanted to buy? Too much of the airspace in retail for the last 10 years has all been about the virtual. E-commerce this, website that, app this. Let's start changing that balance and getting the reality of retailing back in our minds, because there's lots we can do. There's lots we can do to really get behind physical retail. This is one of the world's biggest companies. It's the highest retailer per profit per square meter of any company in the world. But they absolutely recognize that staff and team members are key to engagement with their customers. They have more staff per square meter than any other store, even cosmetics halls. Why? Because in bringing their products to the market and in getting the level of conversation and confidence and understanding with customers, having people there is key to the deal. That's clearly unlike some brands which are actually thinking very hard about taking people out of the mix. And I really do believe that this is one of the biggest mistakes which is being made. Yes, our habits may be changing, but what I can tell you, unfortunately, is that packets are cheaper than people. But people can contribute so much more back to a brand. Engagement, experience, loyalty, and I absolutely urge these corporate giants to think carefully about their investment in tech and not in their high street retail. I've been asking you to think about this for the last 30 minutes, really. Think like a customer. I'd urge you all to go back and review your stores and look with fresh eyes. See what people see. Then think about what can we do? How can we work together a team to own it, fix it, and make it work? It doesn't have to be big, expensive, or fancy. Sometimes it can be just as simple as actually putting a few baby wipes in the customer toilet, because that's the little bit of difference that made that customer's day better. Getting the basics right should have a 360 approach. Presentation, store standards, replenishment, good stock management. And always look for how you can add more value to a customer's life, and you can do more to give them a reason to come back to you. Now, this little fella has only got very simple tools in his armory, but I can tell you, he is out to play to win. And that's exactly the message that retailers big and small who really want to make their businesses work are getting right behind. Selfridges, again, won last year Best International Department Store. It didn't happen by accident. It happened because of 20 plus years of solid investment into making their business better. Exciting brands, great displays, clear presentation, amazing store layouts, all underpinned by fabulous customer service. And as Harry Gordon himself said, There are no hard times for good ideas. And if there's one thing that retail needs at the moment, it's a rallying cry and a chorus from the high street of great ideas to make things better. I hope you found some value from my session. I believe we're just about up. If you're interested in what we do and who we do it for, you can see us online. But this is our message. We really want to leave this with you. Let's all get behind this. Shops fight back, and let's make a difference in 2019. Thank you all, and enjoy your day.
Thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed that first talk. What a way to kick off Spring Fair 2019. So please put your hands together again for Karl McKeever.